Fantastic. It looks like we are ready to go. Hopefully everybody got a nice refreshing break and ready for the rest of our agenda. So we are at item number 7 on our agenda. We have our Argyll and Bute Children and Young People's Service Plan for 2023, and I'm very pleased to invite Fiona Davies in to talk to this report. So I'll hand over to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. And with your permission, Chair, I'm actually going to introduce the board to Beth Wiseman, who's joined me on the call, to take us through the report. I'm sure many of the board members will recall our Senior Child Health Manager, Tricia Renfrew, who worked for many years in NHS Highland and had a 40-year career and retired earlier this year. And I must say we were very fearful that we'd never be able to fill Tricia's very substantial shoes, but we've been extremely fortunate in our recruitment to have Beth Wiseman come and join us. We're absolutely delighted, and she's made an absolute fantastic start in getting to know the children's health and broader agenda within Argyll and Bute. So Beth's going to take us through the report this afternoon, and myself and Beth will be happy to pick up any questions once she's taken board through that. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you, everybody. So the Children and Young Persons Service Plan, it came together through a shared vision aligning both national and local directives. The national wellbeing outcomes are interlinked with the whole framework being underpinned through the Getting It Right for Every Child, the United Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the Promise. By doing this, there is a strong focus on person-centred care, as well as co-designing and delivery of services. There's 4 main priorities. Priority 1, which is ensuring GIRFIC, Getting It Right for Every Child, is central to our core working practice, that we're getting it right for all of our children and young people. Priority 2 is access to early help and support. Priority 3 is about improving our mental health and wellbeing of our children and young people. And priority 4 is about our children's rights. To give you a bit of an overview of what's been happening recently, is that our children and young people at Hermitage Academy have provided feedback and helped co-design the animation for this service plan, as well as the one-page plan that will accompany the document. The children and young people have worked with the community learning development to create a model for youth voice that can contribute to the plan and support the co-design, as well as a working group that is established to create a sustainable model for youth voice, and the associated group that will ensure that there is involvement in the children and young person support plan, service plan, not support plan. Furthermore, consultation and survey feedback from children and young people is being used to inform the priorities. There's excellent work ongoing to have a trauma-informed community, with gaps and needs analysis taking place to understand our current provision, identifying areas of good practice that can be replicated, and identify areas that further work is required. This is taking place across our care experience population, our mental health and wellbeing provision, as well as our neurodevelopmental services, to name just a few. Our child health weight development programmes are being progressed, with intervention and programmes that are already in place being monitored and reviewed, ensuring that there is necessary links to the relevant strategy with work being progressed. Gathering the views of all is paramount to effective service planning and assessment of future needs. Our priorities are fluid, ensuring resources are directed with the aim of achieving measurable change and reducing outcome gaps. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll pass you over to Fiona to see if there's anything else that she would like to add at this time.
Thanks, Beth. I'm quite happy to just take questions at this point, I think. Thank you for taking us through that.
Thank you, Fiona, and thanks, Beth, for coming along to give us a little bit more detail behind this very thorough plan that we had in our pack. And obviously, some of us will be discussing this. I think we've got it again at our IJB tomorrow, so we'll have opportunity for a second airing, maybe at a slightly more granular level. But I'm happy if anybody wants to come in with any comments or questions. I've got a couple which I might actually ask again tomorrow, but I want to ask them today because my curiosity won't wait. I was really interested in the change around and I'm sorry, I'm going to get the proper terminology wrong, but the change around how the counselling in the schools is commissioned, provisioned. And I suppose I was reflecting, having children in a couple of schools in Argyll and Bute, I was just interested to know how the need for that is assessed. So how I suppose do we decide that a child would benefit from that kind of support? And equally, from a kind of commissioning perspective, how do we know what volume of need it is that we need to address when we're doing that planning? And then I did have a second question as well, which I'll just throw out there at the same time. Particularly thinking about our children and young people in our most remote and rural areas, in particular some of our smallest islands where we perhaps don't have the same facilities and infrastructure as we do in other places. So I am thinking about where I live. We don't have a swimming pool, we don't have various other bits and pieces. And I was noting the page where we talk about, active and healthy children and how participating in certain activities can not only help them to be, physically healthy and good for their mental health, but also kind of reduce their feelings of isolation, which I noted, show quite high comparatively. So I just wondered what our thinking was around that and how we might potentially work with third sector partners in those really small remote areas to sort of try and close that gap a little bit, and what that might look like. So sorry, there was quite a lot of questions all bunched into one, but it'd be great if you could pick some of those up. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Beth, are you happy to pick up the counselling one in terms of how that's identified with the individual child? And I'm happy to pick up the commissioning part of that one, and maybe I'll also pick up the point around the partnership working for really remote communities.
Yes, absolutely. So the school counselling has been working extremely well, and there's lots of different avenues for the school counselling to be accessed. So just now we're looking at the referrals coming in via education, so the work through the guidance teachers, but also strong links from the child and adolescent mental health team and from the school nursing team as well. There has been an increase in the number of referrals from all aspects, and it's about making sure that it's stepped care so that people are accessing it at the right time. So making sure that there's not duplication of effort from any one people, that if they're needing CAMHS, that they can access CAMHS. If they're needing school nursing, then they're accessing school nursing at the right time, but without a long wait. So I think that there's been really good collaboration between the exchange, which is the school counselling service, school nursing, education and the CAMHS service. And there's further ongoing work that's happening next week just to make sure that we've got those pathways correct between the links between all three. So that's work that's continuing because the exchange is fairly new within Argyll and Bute. Does that answer your question, Chair?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful to understand, and yeah, interested to pick up the commissioning bit with Fiona, because I think that's sort of the other half of the jigsaw.
Thanks, Chair. So, but one of the strengths I think that we have in Argyll and Bute is that we've got a long-established strategic group that look at the needs of children, in which child health, educational psychology, social work, and education meet regularly together. And it's that group that have produced this work and the previous plans that this one is built on. And so there's a well-established mechanism for sharing information with each other about what is happening in terms of both trends of need now, but also looking retrospectively at data, and also cross-referencing that with the work that we do through the planning of the Joint Strategic Plan and other kinds of needs assessment and understanding. So it's that group that take the lead on the shared commissioning arrangements. and it would be them that would be analysing data that's coming through to make judgments about whether the way we've organised service delivery in the past is going to be fit for emerging trends, or needs assessment work indicating future patterns and trends. And that's where you'll see changes, such as there's been in the school counselling service, and where that analysis has indicated that an existing model maybe isn't going to be fit for purpose if we continue on with that without making a change at that point. So that's where the commissioning happens. And that's also a group that has the third sector represented on it. So I think the points you're making about very remote and rural communities, that would be the place we'd want to be working with our third sector partners to see what more we can do to ensure, as you say, that that equity of experience can be optimised in areas where we haven't got an equity of facilities or infrastructure. And that's where that conversation happens. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts about this, but you're right. I'll probably make sure that I attend the next strategic planning group and I can throw them on the table at that point. But that's good to understand that approach. Thank you. I've got a few other people that'd like to come in as well, so I'm going to bring in Susan next, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Really interesting to read and very well presented, very clear and easy to follow. Thank you. I mean, I particularly wanted to pick up the thing about the loneliness experienced by young people, and I think many people might be shocked to see that young people experience more loneliness than elderly people. And the report mentions people in rural Scotland. Now we know there's rural and then there's rural. You know, so in terms of by the time you're out on the small islands, it's a really different experience on top of that. So I just wondered, it links to some of the other things you've said. What are we able to do to particularly target some work at overcoming that loneliness? Thank you.
Beth, do you want to pick that one up?
I suppose I was hoping that some of the work that we're doing with the children and young people will help us provide some answers, because I think that up until now, some of the adults' thoughts on what we can do maybe doesn't link in with what children and young people think are the right answers for that. So certainly our collaboration with our children and young people and that youth voice will hopefully give us some of the answers that actually will be more meaningful for those that do feel lonely, rather than us coming in thinking we've got the magic wand. So I'm hoping that over the course of the next 12 months, we will have some real and meaningful answers to that.
Can I just add to that as well, Chair, because I think there's been a considerable amount of work undertaken in the last 12 months with care experienced young people within localities across Argyll and Bute. And I was just recently at our corporate parenting board, and the work is quite distinct in each locality because it has been co-produced with the children themselves. So what they want and what they feel they need is quite different. But I wonder that there's learning we can take from that particular group of care experienced children and young people and broaden out that same philosophy, as Beth was saying, to other children and young people. You know, it's progress, but I think there's more that we can do to kind of learn from what we've already done and spread that work.
Thanks, Fiona. And I suppose reflecting on other work that we've done in the strategic planning group and thinking about even within localities, as we know, there will be some stark differences. And even if I think about locally where I live, the children who live on Jura would probably ask for some very different things from the children who live on Isla. And I think it's great that we're thinking about how we capture that. Okay, I've got, sorry, Pam, did you want to come in on this, or was it on something else?
No, and I'll just come at the end. It's
fine. Okay, no, that's great, thank you. Okay, I'll take Jean next, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, like Susan, I really enjoyed this report, and think it's been very well put together, and thank you to everyone who has done that, and congratulations on that work. My question is around this section that briefly talks about trauma-informed workforce. It states in the report there that training has been rolled out, and I would just like to know a little bit more about that. What does the training look like, and how has it been rolled out across education, health, social care, third sector? Thanks.
I don't have all the answers at hand, but I know that it has certainly been rolled out across different parts of education and health and social work, and it's looking at different parts of the community at the moment, so that we have train the trainers. So we have representatives who are trainers within health and education at the moment, and there's a shared approach to the training at the moment. I've come into it quite late because I've only been in post a few months, so I'm still getting up to speed on all that data, but I can certainly get that information and share it to Fiona, and Fiona can share it around the group if that would be helpful.
Thanks, Beth. And Jean, I attended the trauma conference that's referenced there in November in Dunoon, and there's a member of teaching staff who has a dedicated post in supporting the rollout of the trauma-informed training across the partners, and the lead educational psychologist also has a key role in coordinating the training approach. So I've not had that myself, so I can't tell you the detail of it. But the turnout at the trauma event would suggest that there's a great acceptance right across partners. So we had third sector, independent sector, schools, social work, health, CAMS, all attending. So yeah, I can get you the detail of the training itself, but it was a hugely uplifting event with external speakers, and there's clearly a great ownership of a trauma-informed approach across all agencies.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Beth. I'll bring in Louise next, please.
Thanks. And as folk know, I'm relatively new to this role. I can't say new now, I've been here a few months, but one of the things that I'm still understanding is the difference of my role within the IJB as opposed to the lead agency. And certainly I've been probably a lot more engaged at the moment in how the Children's Services Plan is being developed in Highland as opposed to Argyll and Bute. So I suppose the question is really how we can best support the work going forward and be part of that whole conversation about where we need to go with this and how we can work together on that.
Thanks, Louise. Well, as you know, my favourite people are volunteers. So I think that what we need to do is get you an invite to the next strategic partnership group, and we can review the terms of reference, because I'm sure that there should be a health seat in addition to any IJB seat. And if you want to be that volunteer, I'm sure that none of your colleagues are going to knock you over to do it. So I think that might be the way that we can get you absolutely up the middle of this, and your contribution would be most welcome.
And the strategic planning group is a really great group to sit in. It's really great place, lots of good conversations. Okay, I'm going to bring in Pam next, please.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I'm sure as nurse director, the statutory duties will still sit within Argyll and Bute as much as they do in Highland. So I think that connection is really, really important for the, you know, in that supportive way to make sure that we're all playing our part. I haven't really got any questions. One, nice to meet you, Beth, and I loved your answer to Susan's question in terms of, you know, how often do we either as professionals or adults think we know the answers for what kids need. So that was an excellent answer and absolutely the right way to do it. So I really enjoyed that. I think that the report's excellent. It's really easy to follow. It's very clear. The priorities look familiar as to what you would expect to see in the current world. But I'm particularly taken with the fact that the expectation of the multi-agency partners is pulled out and alongside the objectives and the outputs. I think it's just really clear. And I guess in terms of holding ourselves to account within a partnership arrangement as equal partners around this agenda, that I think that sets a really, really important tone, I suppose, and an expectation. And I thought that was extremely helpful as to how that was laid out. So all the best with implementation, but that was really a really excellent report. So thank you.
Thanks, Pam, and I would echo those comments. And actually, just that reminded me of a question I was going to ask. Actually, I know in the past, when we've created different plans relating to children and young people services, not necessarily this plan, but other ones, we've then gone on to create a kind of a much shorter version, which is actually accessible for the children and the young people who perhaps don't wish to read through dozens of pages of text. I wonder, is that something that we're planning to do with this? Will there be a children's version?
Yes, the children and young people have created an animation as well as a one-page document, so they've been involved in creating that.
Great, great. That's
Although,
really good.
Claire, I would add, it's not always just the children that want the one-page version. Just saying.
This is absolutely true. Yes. Lovely. Okay, good. Right, so we were being asked to note the report and take moderate assurance from that, and I'll assume that members are happy with that. Great. And IJB members, we can do it all again tomorrow, so we can come back with more, even better questions tomorrow. Fantastic. That moves us on to item number 8. So this is our Highland Child Poverty Action Report, and I'd like to invite Tim to speak to this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report comes in the wake of the 2017 Child Poverty Scotland Act. This report just relates to the Highland Council area, and is a report on how the agencies in Highland Council area, North Highland, whatever you may wish to call it, are dealing with child poverty, which is a huge issue, and some people actually prefer just to call it poverty rather than particularly looking at referring to child poverty because of the all-embracing elements of poverty. There are a few things to note around the report. One is the position of child poverty and poverty compared with the rest of Scotland, which is fairly similar and to the average, and many tracks that, but clearly hides an awful lot of variation. And one of the particular things to note within the report, as really has been mentioned earlier in connection with the last paper, is around levels of access deprivation and in remote rural areas, which are clearly an awful lot higher for Highland. A couple of other things to note: the dates are not perhaps what we would wish with the report. This comes, I think, to some extent with the legacy of COVID, and that a lot of the work to deal with the reporting of child poverty and related issues stopped for a little while within COVID, and so the timescale of the papers and the timescale of the reporting got moved a bit. So some of the outcomes, for example, right at the end of the paper are actually not that long away. But what we will be hoping to do, or certainly very strongly intending to do for future versions of the paper, is to get a better time scale which more represents what has happened recently and what will happen in the coming year. The second thing to say is that while there are a lot of really important actions that are set out within the report, and it is our obligation to report on that jointly with the council. Of course, that in the Highland Council area there is a different profile around how children's services work, and in addition, a lot of the things to do with poverty are go beyond what we have within the NHS. However, conversely, I'd like to point out two particular general themes with the paper and with child poverty, and how it's exceptionally important for us to keep the issue as a prominent one. The first one is the role of the NHS in general as an anchor institution, and it's likely that board members will hear more about anchor institutions coming up over the next few months and next couple of years. It's a feature in Together We Care, but is also a more prominent feature on national policies. And anchor institutions are those organisations that are in communities, will always be in communities, are large organisations which affect the communities through their presence, through their employment, through what their employees spend, through the way things are procured. And the work of NHS Highland as an anchor institution can have a real effect over months and years in terms of building the community, and in relation to this particular report in terms of reducing child poverty. Secondly, there's also a specific element of the services that we deliver, and this has also been referenced earlier on in the meeting, with comment around the public health role of the midwife, and the services around midwifery are mentioned right at the end within the paper. And all our services, probably particularly primary care, but secondary care as well, have the opportunity to help people, signpost people, make sure that people are aware of services that are available, of benefits that are available, and opportunities that are available, to try to reduce the effects of poverty, which in themselves will help people's health. So the paper is slightly unusual because of the time scale and because of the arrangements in the Highland Council area, but I hope that members found it interesting, and I'm quite happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, I'll open up for any questions or comments from members. Alistair, please.
Yes, thank you, Tim, and thank you for the report. I always get concerned when we talk about child poverty. We will never sort child poverty out until we sort poverty out, and Tim made that point in his speech, because it's a circle. You've got to break the poverty of the parents in order to improve the child poverty situation, and there's some very interesting documentation being produced on that, both by Step Change Citizen Advice and other organisations. I think the other thing I've got to take account is that, of course, this is for 21-22, and as Tim says, is dated, and inflation is actually 2 or 3% higher now than it was at the end of this report. And obviously the increase in mortgage interest rates is going to start biting as well, and adding into the poverty cycle. So it's more a question really for Tim to think, what can we be doing better, because we're nowhere near the storm on this, and the poverty cycle is still going to go on. There's going to be more problems with families and older people coping, because they're disproportionately impacted. And it's really a question of what should we be doing as a board? What does, if you like, I don't know if there is one, but the Association of Public Health Directors think we should be doing on this, because the measures that are contained in the report, whilst very good at alleviating and targeting, are not holistic and wide-reaching enough to address the poverty situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. I don't know, Tim, if you wanted to come back on that, or I saw that Pam's hand shot up as well.
I think quite rightly Alistair highlights the fundamental issues around poverty, as well as child poverty, and particularly what's happened recently. With regard to the last comment about what Directors of Public Health are doing, the Scottish Directors of Public Health as one of the 4 top priorities for work over the next year have identified child poverty as one of those. So I hope that there can be coordinated work for that. In terms of what we will be able to do, I think it is an awful lot more challenging. I think it gets back to the comments I made to some extent from an organisational point of view, around what the role of NHS Highland is as a large institution, like other large institutions, and also the role of individual staff members and staff groups, and is, I suppose, links quite closely to the social mitigation work that's been undertaken in the social mitigation plan, and there are also issues which we can do from directed public health level more nationally, and there has started to be done about lobbying, particularly trying to work with Scottish Government. But there are some very difficult and challenging problems, but it's certainly something that we mustn't forget, because it's a huge something that affects our populations hugely, and their health, and particularly their long-term health.
Thanks, Tim. Pam.
Yeah, thanks very much. Really important stuff, and I know it's dated and it's not the most up-to-date report in terms of where we're at, but it's so connected to so many things that we need to be thinking about, and I guess, you know, that real ownership across the organisation and understanding of that anchor concept and the contribution that we can make to this. In terms of careers, in terms of that locality plan and how you mobilise and support a locality to thrive as opposed to languish, and just our responsibility in that. And I'm not sure that we always take full account of that. So the redesign and the transformation and across our health and social care partnerships, what we do in acute, how we design our services when we ask people to travel. And I think I'd agree with Alistair's point that, you know, every time we put adults through I guess challenges financially, and in work poverty being the bit that we mustn't forget, that we will have an impact on that family holistically. And so when we're thinking about whether we prefer people to be seen face to face, if that's necessary, then fine. But if there is an alternative way to do that, that means people don't have to find the money to put petrol in the car or to get the bus to wherever we need them. I think this is really, really important. And I do wonder that as a board, when we're looking at our SBARs and we're looking at the risk factors, whether we make enough of setting out some of the considerations in the inequalities piece, and whether we could be more explicit around some of our decisions and our questioning when we're looking at redesign, that make sure that we really do think holistically in terms of how we can contribute to that longer term effect rather than the here and now, because I'm not sure that it's still a natural place for people to go, and I think we could be more searching of that as a board.
Thank you, Pam. I would be supportive of that approach, certainly. Okay, I've got Graham next, please.
I'm probably just going to echo what Pam has said. I don't think we should gloss over the absolute importance that anchor organisations can make, and the economic footprint of the jobs that can come to an area through the services. I was thinking of it just in Fort William recently when we were doing the Belford cross-check meeting. It's a phenomenal kind of impact in a town that size in terms of the spend. And do we take enough consideration about how we spend our money and our policies and such like? So I think it's one that we should certainly return to in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. Susan, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just, very similar point. I mean, a really specific example that came up today, the surgeon at the treatment centre said the main constraint on doing more joints was childcare provision, he said. And yet here we've got an action that says we're going to develop options for flexible models of childcare. So, let's join some of this up, because we've got an opportunity to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. I did, but maybe did not. Okay, so we are being asked to note the report that Tim has just taken us through and take moderate assurance on the actions being taken to tackle child poverty. Okay. Great. So I'll move us on now to item number 9. This is our corporate risk register, and I'd like to invite Boyd Peters to speak to this one, please. Over to you, Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. And just for brevity, I would just introduce the paper and advise board members that it's been updated in format as requested by the board the last time. So the report has now been structured so the biggest risks in terms of RAG rating are at the top. The risks have also been coloured to represent the RAG rating, and prior to board meeting, the paper came through the Executive Director Group for final sign-off on its way to this meeting today. There are, I think, from memory, no new substantive risks, but I hope that the format is helpful for board members in seeing what they want to see and understand in the paper. With that, I'll stop the brief introduction and allow any questions or points.
Thank you, Boyd. Yeah, that was actually really, I found that helpful when I was looking at the paper, just to see them sort of categorised a little bit more clearly. Helps to draw the eye to the places that it needs to go. I will open up. Does anybody have any questions for Boyd on the risk register? I just had a bit of a question. I suppose it's more around sort of process and development. We had a helpful board development session where we looked at our risk appetite, which I think board members found really helpful. It gave us the opportunity to kind of explore that. And I just wondered, Boyd, having had an opportunity to sort of take that feedback from the board, is that going to impact how we take this forward? Have we got any plans to do anything differently, or are we quite content that those appetite discussions are adequately reflected in what we're doing just now?
So, Chair, I think probably just separate out the two for the avoidance of confusion. So the risk register, as we see it, and its development will, if members could please think of it as separately, the development in terms of the rest of what we're doing in risk. On appetite, I would hope that we would bring a paper to board in the course of this year, which will bring an agreed and matured appetite statement, and the board development session, which we recently had, has given myself and colleagues some very good homework to get on with, and we would then find a way to get that next version to come past board members in advance of it going to a formal board paper. And in terms of other risk processes and structures, these are being reported in through the audit committee currently. The audit on risk is almost complete, but the next steps in risk journey have been described there, and update papers will come through that governance committee around risk journey. And I also will have a further development session with the board on risk in the course of this year as well. So I hope that gives a sufficient overview of what will be quite a large body of work. It all connects under the word risk, but some elements like the paper we have today, I hope will change minimally, and if it does have to change, it will be to align better with any of the developments in the other parts that I have briefly described just now.
Thank you, Boyd. Alex?
Yeah, just what you said, Boyd, it makes a lot of sense, but I was thinking about the business case that we just took for the maternity upgrades, etc. Thinking of the risks there, particularly on the workforce side, is that something that you're going to think about putting in here, or are you going to let that develop first and see if we need it? And then the other question was on the Statman training. I was impressed this morning by the NTC saying their Statman training was up at 95% or whatever it is. Is the short-term working group or is Louise looking at how did they manage to achieve that? Was it just because it was a cold start basically and therefore there was no great pressure on them? They had an early kick-off of it, or was there something that they actually did that the rest of us could learn from? Thanks.
So I think there were two questions in there. One was the second one was about Statman, and I think what you described was a question around, can we implement in our mitigations something similar to what has happened in the NTC, and if there is crossover, then that will in a strong mitigation reduce or obliterate the risk. So I think that question is one for colleagues to note, and which I wouldn't give an immediate answer to, but would presume that and other efforts are very much being considered as part of the what's happening. And the first question was
about the maternities business case that we've just approved.
Yeah,
I think there's a real risk in there about resources. Can we recruit the people that we need for the job?
So I suppose my response, and it has an element of caution in it, is that at a board strategic level, we want to express risk that captures board-wide. And so if it does express in the board level risk register, it will be a risk that's common in other parts of the organization too. And I think we will, we know that maintaining our staff is definitely something that we have to look at, that if that doesn't go well, that's recruitment and retention and also workforce modelling. If that isn't going well, then we will have later problems. So it will be reflected in that sense. But as a standalone item for a service specific risk, I guess my caution would be that could elevate the risk to the wrong level. I think awareness that it's there and it's one of a set of risks, and understanding for us as board, we want to be assured that the right risks are being considered in the right places where the right mitigations are being looked at. And our assurance wouldn't be to hold the risk, but respectfully to rather be aware that somebody somewhere has spotted the risk, has a plan, identified the size of the risk, and has a plan for what they'll do to stop it happening. The key thing, of course, for risks is that technically they should be things that haven't happened yet, but might, and that you are trying to prevent. The tricky bit for all of us is sometimes not to pull in things that are already here as issues, and so that's another element for us to consider.
Thanks, Boyd. Okay, I'm not seeing. Oh, sorry, Catherine, you wanted to come in.
Yes, just briefly, Alex, just to provide a bit of reassurance on that, you'll have seen the risk registers that we hold against the neonatal programme board, and so that risk is being mitigated and managed against in terms of an enhanced recruitment strategy as we discussed this morning, just for reassurance. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments from members, so we are being asked to take substantial assurance from the report and give confidence in compliance with legislation, policy and our board objectives, noting the risk management process, and as Boyd said, something will come back to our next board meeting around the alignment of the strategy, and also look at the evidence provided and give final decision on the risks that are recommended to be closed or added. I don't think we didn't have any there that we were closing or adding, so it was just looking at the ones that we had there as they were. Is everybody okay with that one? Yes. Okay. Fantastic. Great. I'm going to move us on then to item number 10. So this is our blueprint for good governance version 2 self-evaluation, and I'm just going to open this one up before I hand over to Ruth. So I'm really pleased that we are bringing this to board today. We obviously had the opportunity as a board to be a pathfinder for this new self-assessment tool or set of tools, which aligns with the updated blueprint which was issued at the end of last year to boards across Scotland. And before I do hand over to Ruth, who'll take us through the finer points, I would just like to thank everybody for really engaging in this process. And we've had a lot of support, both internally and externally. Obviously, we had an external facilitator, Nina Mahal, who did a great job, but also a lot of people internally, I know, were involved in pulling this together and taking us through the process. And that began long before I was in post. So I think just to record our thanks to everybody who was involved in that. I'm sure colleagues will agree it was a really worthwhile exercise, but there's still much work to be done. So I am going to hand over to Ruth, who's going to take us through the final points of that.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. So this is Blueprint version 2, which was published in December last year. And like you mentioned, Sarah, as part of the new blueprint, the Scottish Government have set their evaluation of board governance over 3 specific levels. First level is individual member appraisal, secondly is a board level self-appraisal, and then external review. And like you mentioned, we participated in a Scottish Government Pathfinder exercise, which involved a board level survey, and then we held a development session to consider some of the identified improvement areas. So a key outcome of the exercise is the development of a high-level improvement plan and its governance. And the report highlights the improvement themes that have arisen from your consideration of your own self-assessment. And they're set out in the report there: performance, finance and best value, risk, culture, quality, board member development, SBAR development and engagement. And your development session in April confirmed that the plan itself will remain the responsibility of the board, but that you'd like informal involvement of your committee chairs. So it's proposed that a draft improvement plan be shared with the board at the next meeting at the end of July, and thereafter that progress reporting should be undertaken twice a year. So the recommendation on the report there is to take substantial assurance from the activity that's been undertaken so far, to agree that the improvement plan be submitted to your July meeting, endorse the involvement of your committee chairs in its progress, and that twice yearly progress reporting at board level takes place. Thank you, Sarah.
That's great. Thank you, Ruth. And obviously we've discussed this in lots of different places behind the scenes up until now, but this is just to formalise what's going to happen next with it. Happy if anybody has any questions or comments. Take those now before we approve. Okay, everybody quite happy to proceed on that basis. Great. Okie dokie. So that takes us on now to item number 11. So this is a review of our various committee membership. So clearly we've got some changes to our board membership, both upcoming changes and as a result of me moving into a different role. So it's necessary for us to update and adjust our committee membership to make sure we've got all the right people in all the right places. And again, I'm just going to hand over to Ruth, who's going to take us through the specifics before we approve that.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So yes, this is covering some of the current and imminent board member vacancies. And the report proposes some permanent and some interim changes to memberships and positions on committees. The notable ones in particular are the Staff Governance Committee for Anne Clark to take on the position of interim chair, and on the Argyll and Bute Integration Joint Board for Graham Bell to take the position of chair, vice chair, and for Sarah to step down from both of those particular positions. Given the timing of various other meetings, we're proposing that changes should take place with immediate effect. We're also considering another report to the July meeting so that we can sweep up any other arrangements that maybe need to be made, particularly relating to Pharmacy Practices Committee. So the board's invited to take substantial assurance from the report and agree to the changes with immediate effect.
Thank Thank you, Ruth. And just to pick up a slight side point, to reassure members that there is work going on in the background with regards to recruitment of additional board members as is necessary, and also to do a longer piece of work around our succession planning, looking at the skills we have and what we're going to need going forward. So that work is underway behind the scenes. We'll be able to update you on that in due course as well. Graham.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not looking for more work. Sarah, but you said to me that in fact I would also be taking on vice chair of the finance committee, and I'm only down there as on the Argyll and Bute finance committee, and I'm only down there as a committee member. So just for clarity on that.
I think that was for the Argyll and Bute finance one.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm only down on the paper as a member. Okay.
So just owing to the slightly sort of clunky way that we have to do it, that will actually get approved by the IJB tomorrow. Okay. So we don't have that power, but we can gift you the joy of being the vice chair of the IJB, and then what we'll do is tomorrow at the IJB they'll give you more presents as a result of that, which will involve.
What can I say? I'm overcome.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. So we get to do more of this tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
And Alistair, please.
Yep, thanks. Just for completeness, Clinical Governance Committee did decide that Joanne would be the vice chair of Clinical Governance Committee, so perhaps that could just be added in, and then that'll make it complete. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, certainly we can include that in the report.
Great. Okay, so just to check, yeah, we've been asked to take substantial assurance, and is everybody happy taking into account that slight amendment or that update, sorry, that Alistair just provided? We happy to agree those changes? Lovely. Okay, item number 12 then, checking I haven't missed one. No, we're good. Item number 12, so this is our annual reports from our various governance committees. People will have seen these a number of times before. They've been through their various committees. They've also been through audit, and they are just in front of us today to note them. But happy if anybody has anything they wish to add to that, or any questions they want to pick up. Nope. Okay, great. So we will take those as noted. And that takes us on to item number 13. So this is the Community Empowerment Act annual reports, and I'd like to invite Ruth to speak to that, please.
Thank you. Yep. So this is the Community Empowerment Act annual reports, and that covers both asset transfers and public participation requests under the Community Empowerment Act. It's important to just reiterate that we do have dedicated pages on our website specifically to guide and inform members of the public about both asset transfers and public participation requests, and we're doing our best to make these as prominent as we possibly can on our new website. We have plans over the coming year to make the application processes more accessible, with a wider variety of methods of applying, and to include a more streamlined online application format, if we can manage to do that. In terms of asset transfers, the annual report shows that we received 2 applications for asset transfers during 2022 to 23. These relate to properties at the Staffin Nurses Base and Ian Charles Hospital in Granton-on-Spey. As yet, neither of the applications were determined or resulted during that financial year. An application relating to McKinnon Memorial Hospital was withdrawn by the community company. I'll move on to public participation requests. And over the previous financial year, we didn't actually have any public participation requests made during that financial year at all. NHS Highland already engages quite widely with third sector and other partners, and it's very likely that our existing engagement activities, has meant that there's been very little need for any formal approach through the Community Empowerment Act provisions. We're certainly not aware of anything that's been initiated through that. We also take the opportunity to reference the board's engagement framework, which also sets out how services should engage with communities and the plans to develop training and guidance to support services to engage as well. So the board's invited to approve the annual reports and take substantial assurance from them. Alan will be able to provide more information if anybody has any specific queries about the asset transfers. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? I suppose I have a question, but it is one that we maybe can't answer yet, given that we have sort of requests that are still sort of going through the system. It would be interesting to understand in the future, assuming that we have some kind of completed asset transfers to examine, it would be interesting to understand what that experience was like from the community's perspective, or from the community organisation that's doing the asset transfers perspective. And I suppose I'm reflecting on work that I've done within a local third sector organisation, and some of the challenges certainly in the past around asset transfer and navigating that landscape. So I think, you know, we're not there yet, but I think in the future it would be interesting to do a bit of a look and see how easy it is to engage with us as a third sector organisation or a community organisation trying to achieve an asset transfer. But that's something for the future. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we're being asked to take substantial assurance and approve that annual report. I'm happy to do that. Great. Super. Now, it does say on the agenda that we will take a comfort break, but actually we're ahead of schedule and there's not an awful lot left on the agenda. So I'm going to say that we just power through. I think we can do it. Okay. So takes us on to agenda item number 14. This is our register of members' interests. Again, just in front of us to note, this is our annual register of interest for our board members. Not a huge amount more I can say about that, but happy if anybody's got anything that they want to flag or question or comment on that before we note it. No. Great. Okay. I shall move us on then. So we are now onto the last section of our agenda. So this is section number 15, and these are our assurance reports from our governance and committees. So it's an opportunity for our chairs to escalate any issues and people to ask questions. So first up, 15A, we have our clinical governance committee. So I'd like, Alistair, if there's anything as chair that you'd like to bring to our attention, please.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. I think the minutes lay out quite clearly the items we discussed at the meeting. The only thing that the committee wanted escalated relates to the item we've already discussed on the risk register, which is risk number 706, the workforce and the implications through not being able to recruit or retain a workforce. And I think, as Boyd rightly said on that item, you know, risks about things that haven't happened yet but might happen. And I think Clinical Governance Committee on the day had, out of 11 reports, 8 of them had identified quite clearly that staffing attrition and staffing recruitment was causing an issue to the being able to give high levels of assurance. I note that the EDG is currently looking at the situation and perhaps potential measures. So I don't know, Sarah, if it would be appropriate to have an item coming to the board meeting that took a holistic look at what actions they're actually taking at a time when they've been worked through the EDG. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Alistair around Clinical Governance Committee? No, okay, thank you, Alistair. I'll move us on then to the Highland Health and Social Care Committee. I'm hoping Philip can speak to that one in Jerry's absence. I if there's anything that needs to be escalated or highlighted. Oh, sorry, Ruth, go on.
Sorry, yeah, just to confirm, unfortunately, Philip's had to leave the meeting, so I'm afraid there isn't anybody. Yeah.
Okay, so what we can do, if anybody does have any questions, I'm happy that we can take them and record them and come back. No, okay. Next, we have Finance, Resource and Performance Committee, and I'd like to invite Alex to speak, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we've discussed quite a bit today already at the board meeting on what came through FRP. So we had the finance draft for the financial plan, we had the maternity business case, but the one thing we haven't yet is the environmental sustainability. And we got a letter from the Scottish Government, triple planetary crisis, climate change, pollution and biodiversity loss. And Alan Wilson was talking considerably about that. There will be plans coming through for that. There is a senior manager in place to deal with that, and that report will come through the FRP. So in future for board, we'll include that report in our committee papers coming in through there. That's it, thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments on that? No. Okay, great. I will move us on then. So we're now up to 15D. This is our Audit Committee Assurance Report. And I'd like to invite Gaynor, please, to give us any highlights or escalations.
Thank you. It was a really busy audit committee. So we were able to close off a number of outstanding management actions from previous audits, which was really good. The committee agreed to defer the audit relating to children's services from this year till 23-24, so into our next audit year, due to complexities around that, and internal and external audit we're happy with that approach. So that will be reflected in the audit plan for 23-24. Committee also agreed to take off our audit plan for 23-24 an audit in relation to quality. That was because that work is being or similar work is being done internally by NHS Highland, who have already begun that piece of work. So it was thought it would be duplication if that went through internal audit as well. So committee agreed that that could be taken off the audit plan for the 22-23. In the June meeting, which we'll have in a few weeks, we are going to mop up the last of the audit reports for the 22-23 session. So there'll be a number of reports coming to that committee, but minus the one relating to children's services and minus the one relating to quality, for the reasons that I've just given you. The committee agreed the internal audit plan for 23-24 as well. So we have that going forward, and we expect at the June meeting to have more of a plan as to when those audits are going to take place. So for this year, we're aiming to not have so many things coming towards the end of the audit year, really trying to space things out so we don't have a big bunch of audits that we're looking at kind of May, June time. So yeah, I think that's all I've got to report. Obviously, I've already asked for EG to be updated on the progress of the audits for this year and the ones that we're looking to do in our plan, and asked that people please help internal audit to get those final reports finished for coming to audit committee in June, before we then move to the final signing of the accounts and all the paperwork that goes with that the week after. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaynor. And Hillis, you wanted to come in on that.
Thank you. Yeah, just wanted to add to that. We had a private conversation as well around appointment of our internal audit. We've been through a procurement process due to the end of term for our current audit provision, and just to confirm that assets have been awarded that contract again.
Thanks, Helen. Okay, any questions or comments around audit? No, okay. Next is staff governance. That's me. We also had a very full meeting, a really good spotlight session from Elspeth, which stimulated lots of conversations, which then tied into kind of what we were looking at the end of the agenda around, unsurprisingly, workforce recruitment and those kind of challenges. I suppose I would reflect that this is a moment of change for the staff governance committee, so it gives us quite a good opportunity just to refresh and see where we are. Fiona Hogg has moved on and we'll be welcoming Gareth in soon, and also with a change from myself over to Anne. So I think it's quite a good opportunity for us to just do a bit of a sense check and make sure that what we're doing at staff governance committee is still the right thing and the right level of detail. So that'll be work that we do going forward. Happy to take any questions or comments. Okay, and then lastly is the Argyll and Bute IJB. That's me again. I don't have anything particularly to highlight from the last meeting. Everything was laid out there in the minutes. Obviously we've got our next meeting tomorrow, so we're always a little bit out of sync. But again, happy to take any questions or comments on those last set of minutes. Okay, great. So we can note all of those. So just before we wrap up, any other competent business? No. So just to confirm, the date and time of our next board meeting is the 27th of June at 9:30 a.m. I thank you everybody for your time and your contributions today, and I will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Enjoy your concert, Sarah.
Thanks, Evan.